The first cell, the very first cell, where did it come from? So which came first, the chicken or the egg? You've heard that question before, haven't you? Well, the evolutionist is going to have to say the egg came first, because how else would you come up with the chicken? However, God, in his scientific logbook, he told us which came first. He actually tells us that the chicken came first. That's right. If you look back in Genesis, it says, "And God said, let there be light, and there was light." God, by speaking the word, brought about every single animal that has ever been created on this planet. When he did so, he created the chicken, or he created the elephant, or he created the giraffe by just speaking into existence. As we study microbiology, I think you're going to see that God's way is the only way that makes sense. Without an intelligent designer, the first egg could not have formed upon its own. There is way too much complexity to the factory of the cell. A factory makes a 747. Each step in the process of making that jet airliner has been planned and must take part in a specific order. It must be performed accurately. If there is a mistake that happens in that factory, that airliner could crash as soon as it gets in the sky, with a whole lot of people inside who've trusted their lives to that jet airliner. I don't know about you, but when I get on that jet airliner, I want to know for sure that it was made accurately and correctly, and that it's going to hold up for the entire flight. If I told you this process happened by chance, that all the parts came together to form that jet airplane, and that no brilliant brain was needed at any step along the process, you'd decide I was completely crazy, right? So let's look at the factory of the cell and imagine the very first cell coming into existence. A cell membrane alone does not produce life. A mitochondria alone does not produce life. A Golgi apparatus alone does not produce life. But somehow, put them all together, and they all work together, and you have life. As we study each organelle, you're going to learn about what each organelle does for the cell. I want you to ask yourself the question, does it make sense that this organelle just happened by chance to evolve by accident with no direction or plan behind its formation? So let's go back to that cell membrane and let's get started thinking about it. If the cell membrane fails, there is death to the cell due to things going in that shouldn't be going in and things coming out that should not and cannot go out. The cell membrane itself, as you'll see as we study it, has all sorts of ways to keep things in and to allow certain things out. How could the cell membrane have just happened to pop into existence? It's not just a bunch of molecules ordered in such a way as to form compartments. There are all sorts of specialized proteins and molecules that must be present and work right for the cell membrane to do what it must do for life to happen. Think about this, the protein channels themselves. As you study them, you will see that the protein channels are designed in such a way as to allow very specific things in and out of the cell at a specific level. As you study the cell membrane, I want you to really focus on all the parts of the cell membrane that has to be in place for the cell to be able to have a working cell membrane. So let's just think for a second about what evolution says. Evolution says that first cell just happened to come together by chance, that all the different proteins just kind of came together and we got the first cell. The process of just getting the very first cell to evolve by chance, though, is very, very difficult. So what I'd like to do is look at some of the actual quotes that come out of some science textbooks that help us understand where the concepts and the ideas of how that first cell came to be are found. So the first thing we have to think about is what were the conditions of the earth before that first cell came into being. And this is what they say. And I want you to think about it. It's highly speculative because nobody was there, right? We're just guessing. It's very hypothetical conditions that cannot be proven scientifically or evidentially. When we talk about where that first cell came from and we discuss it evolutionarily speaking, there is nowhere that we can go to find those actual evidences. We are only making guesses. When we talk about creation, remember, we have a scientist who was there and left us a science logbook, which was God, and we can trust him. Scientists have no idea what the early environment was like on Earth. That's the truth. We do not know. But here's what the evolutionists will say. I'm going to read this specifically straight from a textbook. It is called The Nature of Life, and it is by John H. Postlethwaite and Janet L. Hobson. It's actually a college textbook, and I'll be reading from the pages of this textbook. So on page 320, we will see what kind of science experiments they did to say that this is the conditions on the Earth. This is what they did. It says they filled a flask with gases they thought might have been present in the atmosphere 4 billion years ago. So what I want you to hear in what they just quoted there in that textbook is the certainty to which the scientists are basing their beliefs upon. Remember what it said. It said they, the scientists, filled a flask with gases they what? They thought what? Might have been present in the atmosphere 4 billion years ago. Was anybody there 4 billion years ago? No. And they're very honest in here to say they thought that they might be present. These are scientists. These are people with brains. They're actually thinking about putting things together and what might we get. So even in the science lab, we see minds thinking and driving the experiment that brings about something that they think is a possibility of proof of life. Okay, on page 320, a little bit farther down on the page in our textbook, this is what it says. Chemists recreated their concept of the early atmosphere and oceans and generated monomeres with simulated lightning, unquote. Okay, so what they're saying here is that the chemists got together and they put in their concept of what the early atmosphere would look like with the oceans, and they actually got monomeres to form when they put simulated lightning in. So where did the lightning come from? If we're trying to prove that all of life just happened to come popping into existence and nobody was behind it, where did the lightning come from? You know, you don't see lightning that just happens to happen. It's actually caused by something. Whatever it was that caused the first lightning strike was pretty powerful. And we have to consider that. See, they are putting into the experiment their own simulated lightning. So they really are proving the need for a creator. On page 320, we still see some more really cool stuff here. And this is what it says, quote, modern variations on this experiment continue to show that organic compounds form easily under conditions probably close to those found on Earth more than 4 billion years ago, unquote. Okay, again, what do we have in our statement? We have a probably, conditions probably close to. So we got some ideas of how things might have happened. We get some monomeres. Well, monomeres are not life, okay? They are not a cell with a cell membrane, a nucleus, a Golgi apparatus, or lysomes, or any of the things that are necessary for life to happen. None of that. It isn't even a DNA molecule that we have. We just have monomeres, which are just molecules that are just kind of stuck together in no specific order necessarily. It says that they had organic compounds that formed of that. That is not that they came out and saw a cell form. Now in science we have the laws of thermodynamics. And on page 82 in our textbook that I've been reading from, this is what it says about the first law of thermodynamics. It says, quote, energy can be changed from one form to another, but during these conversions it is conserved. That is, it is neither created anew nor destroyed. Thus, there is a constant amount of energy in the universe, but it can change form. Unquote. Okay, so right there in the first law, we see that energy can neither be created anew or destroyed. Therefore, how did we come about with the first act of evolution? If energy cannot be created anew or destroyed, then what brought about the energy that first was needed to bring about the first cell, or for this matter, the first monomere? The second law of thermodynamics says and we'll find that on page 82 of the textbook as well. Quote, systems always tend toward greater states of disorder. Given enough time, the energy in every system will undergo spontaneous conversions from one form to another, but these conversions are inefficient, and some energy will change form and inevitably be lost to the surrounding environment as heat, unquote. So what we actually see in the second law is we see a disorder and an inefficiency, not order and efficiency that's necessary to go from a slimy little piece of monomer to that very first cell that has a cell membrane and a nucleus and a Golgi apparatus and all the things it needs to actually be viable. All of that order could not have come from disorder by the second law of thermodynamics. It also says on page 83, it defines for you what heat is. It says, quote, nothing more than the random commotion of atoms and molecules, unquote, is what heat is. So it's a randomness. And then what is randomness? Well, on page 83, it goes on and says, quote, randomness is the opposite of order. The inefficient conversion of energy from one form to another results in increasing disorder in the system. So get that. Basically what we're saying is when we look at all of life, we look at how it works, we don't see things getting more efficient and becoming more orderly. In the complete opposite, what we do see is things going towards disorder, inefficiency. That's what we see. Randomness brings about disorder, not order. So if we want to say evolution is the way that life began on our planet, then we are basically having to take everything we know about science and throw it out the window to get that first event to happen. It can't work that way. If you want to look at it scientifically and you see order all the way down to one single cell, then you have to say that that single cell got the order from something smarter than itself, more powerful than itself. It could not have just happened by chance and randomness and disorder that causes even more disorder. Here's an example of entropy, and it's found on page 83 of our textbook. Quote, entropy accounts for the energy that escapes the system during transformations and is no longer usable. Anyone who has ever tried to keep a room tidy is already quite familiar with the concept of entropy. Without a constant input of energy to clean up dust and dirt and put clothes and books away, entropy tends to increase and things go downhill fast. Unquote. There we go. So left to itself, it all goes downhill fast, and they just said it in their textbook. So why are they trying to claim that they're at the beginning of time? Things just happen to come together with the right substances that just kind of jostled around with a little bit of lightning thrown in there, and we got order. And not only did we get order, but we got even better order as time went by, and even better order and more design and more complexity until you have a human being with a brain that's able to even think about its own existence. So let's think about the law as it's observed in the environment. All right? So we're going to look at page 83 of our textbook, and we're going to kind of think about what do we see? We're going to be scientists here. We're going to look at what we already can see and ask ourselves, does it fit the picture of there is no God and everything just happened by chance to pop into existence? On page 83 it says this, quote, the flow of energy through an ecosystem is predicted by the laws of thermodynamics. Nuclear energy from atomic fusions taking place in the sun is converted to light, to chemical energy in the plant's tissues, and to mechanical energy in the animal's tissue, the first law. With each interconversion in this chain, some energy is lost as heat, diffuses away, and becomes uselessly disorganized, the second law. This explains why there are many plants, fewer deer, even fewer cougars, and no cougar predators, unquote. Wow. That makes a lot of sense to me. It really does. That sounds like what I see in and around my environment. That sounds like science. But when they try to tell me that I'm supposed to believe that all of this happened by chance, that everything just evolved randomly from nothing, that doesn't fit the scientific picture of what I just read. With evolution, we go from nothing to something that has order and has organization and complexity. And that organization and complexity gets more and more complex as time goes by. Can evolution really explain the steps of change necessary for the living cell to emerge from proteins and RNA molecules floating around on the earth? Compartmentalization is necessary to go from a naked molecule to a cell. What do I mean by compartmentalization? I mean the idea of all those compartments that make up that first single cell. How did we get the cell membrane, the Golgi apparatus, the nucleus? All those are compartments of the cell that are absolutely essential for that cell to be able to be viable. So what does the evolutionists say about this? Well, here's what they say about compartmentalization. Quote, and this is from page 322. Quote, compartmentalized systems would then have been selected on the basis of their more efficient absorption of raw materials and use of energy and the fidelity of their replication, unquote. Okay, I want you to think critically about what they just said. What they said was that they would be selected. By whom? Who is selecting the compartmentalized system? They say that whatever it is that's doing the selecting it's selected by the more efficient absorption of raw materials. Well, who is it that is deciding what is the most efficient absorption of the raw materials? And the use of energy. And then the fidelity of the replication. What it's saying is somehow the cell itself is able to somehow decide, ooh, this evolved compartmentalized system is best for me. So therefore, I'm going to keep doing that. Now, I don't know about you guys. You all know I'm not very tall. And you know that bothers me. The fact that most of my students are taller than me, I don't like that. And I've been working on it for years. I keep trying to tell myself, if I just think that I'm taller, if I just tell myself that, hey, it is better for me to select a taller body. It would be more efficient for me if I was taller, and therefore I would be able to, reach things in the kitchen that I need. Therefore, I would just go to bed at night thinking about it, and in the morning I would wake up a little taller. That's impossible. Y'all know it doesn't work, because otherwise your teacher would be much taller than she is, right? I don't get to pick those things. I don't get to decide to evolve. How did the first proteins and the first RNA molecules decide that this was the better thing? That this was the thing to select for, that I should become compartmentalized. I need a cell membrane, so I'll evolve one. That doesn't work. Something had to have been behind it. So what are the problems with evolution? Well, one, it's against the laws of entropy. There's disorder to order rather than order to disorder. Two, who is doing the selecting? How does it know the more efficient pathway or the increased fidelity of replication? Chance alone cannot do that. When you go to organize your bedroom, you don't just walk in there and go, well, I don't understand why the books didn't organize themselves alphabetically. That would have been a lot better if my books were alphabetical, and I don't understand why they're still not alphabetical. You would have to put them that way. A random system could not know and choose its own pathway. Only something with a mind can know and cause something. If therefore evolutionists want to say natural selection is selecting and causing the changes based on knowledge of efficiency and fidelity, then they have set natural selection up as the causal power that is God. So basically, when an evolutionist say no, it would be natural selection that chose, what they're basically saying is natural selection has a very good mind, and it is the thing that's choosing, which means it has to be a God. It has to be the creator. On page 322, this is what our textbook says, quote, perhaps a competition between compartments for limited raw materials from the surrounding environment led to selection for a series of enzymes that could modify more abundant materials into less available ones. In this way, metabolic pathways would have evolved with the ability to harvest energy from chemical bonds and synthesize new materials, unquote. I don't know about you guys, but I've never seen competition be able to create something that would make itself better. Competition alone cannot make something happen. Something with the ability to choose must make the choice. Competition in the animal world may cause an animal to choose to go one place or over another, but the animal was the one choosing to go, not the competition. And the animal was alive with a mind capable of choosing. A compartment is not alive in and of itself, and it lacks a mind to choose. Here's another fun one I like to talk about with evolution. If things are supposed to happen by chance, it means by luck. It just happened to pop in and oh my goodness, that was really cool. We should have that be part of who we are. And then the organism continues to have that capability. So here's one that I find very fun to play with. I call this one the problem of flight. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to think in your mind, how many different animals can fly? Okay, now I'm thinking you probably said a bird, right?
Here's a bird, and I want you to tell me
what class of animals are birds. And I know you guys know this because you've been in my classes, and they are in the class Aves or Aves. Okay, so then I want you to think about, is there any mammals that can fly? And you probably are thinking, well, yeah, a bat can fly, right? So let's draw a bat. Now, are these the only two animals are these the only two critters that can fly, or are the other creatures that can fly? Well, actually, we do know that bees can fly and other insects, lots of bugs and things like that. So,
we've got a bee, and he can fly, and a whole bunch of different insects can definitely fly, right?
All right, so we see now that we've got class Aves, Mammalia, and Insecta that can all fly. Well, this is a problem to evolution because remember, evolution says things happen by chance. This is the better way of doing things, and therefore evolves that capability of doing something. But here's the thing. According to this, all of these critters, they actually fly, but they fly with a little bit of difference in the way that they are designed to fly. And the fascinating thing is they all supposedly evolved the capability to fly completely from different branches of the evolutionary tree, because the way that a bee flies is completely different than the way that a mammal flies. And the way a mammal flies is completely different than the way that a bird flies. And in fact, there's even other animals and insects that fly different than a bee, such as a dragonfly that can hover like a helicopter. Okay? So here we see lots of different ways that animals can fly, and this concept and the capability to fly popped into existence according to evolution accidentally over and over again. Well, that causes a real problem because that's a huge capability to be able to fly. I wish I could fly. If evolution picked the best things, then what happened to our capability to fly? How come if bats can fly and they're a mammal, then why shouldn't we be able to fly? We're mammals too. Or did they get that capability after the fact of some sort of evolutionary branch in the tree? Which poses the question, how on earth did these animals get this capability so many different ways just by chance without a designer that designed them? If we went on a field trip to that jet airliner factory and watched how they built those jet airliners to fly, you'd be pretty impressed. The interesting thing though is we could then go to the helicopter factory and see how they build a helicopter, and you would see some more design, some more amazing detail. You'd be blown away by the way that they could make that helicopter fly. We could then go look at how hang gliders were made and how they stay up in the air. We could go on another field trip to watch and see how rockets don't only leave the atmosphere but can come back like the space shuttle and fly and then land like an airplane. All of these things, you would say there is no possible way in the world that stuff could have evolved, that capability to do those. That had to be a very smart individual, many different smart individuals, to be able to come up with those designs to allow those machines to be up in the air and fly. And yet here we see God's creation, and we say, no, there was not a designer with a brain behind it. It was just by chance that we got the capability of flight, I don't think so. So as we look into the compartmentalization of the cell and we study the cell membrane and see all that it can do, and we study the Golgi apparatus and see all that it can do, and we study the nucleus and see all that we can do, and we even study the lysosome and see how absolutely essential it is, I want you to really stop and ask yourself, does it make sense to say all of this evolved out of chance just because it was the better design? And who was it that came up with the idea of this is a better design that works better for the cell?